How do you respond as a listing agent after receiving a RR form or a request for repairs form from a buyer's agent 10 days after the buyer's investigation period has ended, and then you remind the buyer's agent that you have not received a contingency removal form removing the buyer's investigation? Then they respond saying that the buyer will be glad to remove the buyer's investigation contingency upon a favorable response from the seller to the buyer's request for repairs. Well, that's the exact situation that I'm in right now. I reminded the buyer's agent that per the contract, the buyer agreed to remove the contingency for the inspection upon the 10-day expiration of the buyer's investigation period. I have not received a response to that email, and the question is, how do I proceed at this point? As a new agent, you probably wouldn't know how to handle it, so you would either call the legal hotline and get their advice, or you would contact your broker, your manager, and then move forward accordingly. Well, the purpose behind this video is to tell you exactly how you should respond. And just a quick piece of advice: you're going to come across agents that don't know what they're doing, easily get irritated, agitated, upset, and all that. They easily get offended, and their responses are not always very friendly. We are professionals, and we need to maintain a level of professionalism that any other professional would adhere to. So in this case, since the agent has not responded to my reminder about the buyer's obligation to remove the contingency for the inspection, the best thing to do would be, of course, to advise the seller on how to proceed. So in this particular escrow, I am going to process what is called the NBP, the Notice to Buyer to Perform. On top, it's form number 1. This is the first one that I'm processing, and it's in reference to the purchase agreement dated 5/9/2021. Now this date is the date that's on the top left corner of the RPA of the residential purchase agreement, on the top left corner of the first page. It is not the date that the seller signed or that the buyer signed. You can check off one of these or multiple items on the right. You can check off these as well. I'm only checking out the buyer's investigation period. And then according to the default amount of days, the buyer has 2 days to perform. If they don't perform within the 2 days, the seller may cancel the agreement. Now you can check off this box and put 3 days, 4 days, but generally I always leave it 2 days. That's more than enough time for the buyer to respond. If the buyer does not respond, now we have a situation where the seller can cancel the agreement and they can go after the buyer's earnest money deposit. In this case, it was $9,000. Well, is that the best thing for the seller to do in a situation where they're 20 days into escrow, the appraisal has been completed, the buyer's paying top dollar without the appraisal contingency in place? Is that really the best way to respond? In my opinion, no. You as the listing agent, it is in your fiduciary duty to guide your seller in a way that suits their best interest. So you should, as a listing agent, tell the seller they have 2 options. They can cancel the agreement if the buyer does not remove the contingency for the investigation, or they can try to negotiate on the repairs. In this case, they're asking for several repairs or a $5,000 credit at close of escrow. So the seller can respond, I'm not going to repair anything. I'm not going to give you any money. They can repair the items, some or all, or they can give the buyer some credit at close of escrow, $5,000, $2,000, $3,000. It's all negotiable. The point is that, in my opinion, I believe that the seller should try to meet the buyer halfway, as opposed to trying to cancel the deal and then have to start from scratch finding another buyer. Now, if the seller were to try to cancel the deal and try to keep the $9,000, that in itself is a cumbersome process, because it is not as easy as most people think to be able to keep the $9,000. The reason for that is that the buyer has to sign a release form releasing the EMD, the earnest money deposit, and if they don't sign that, escrow will not release the money to the seller. What happens in this case? Well, you go to mediation or arbitration, and then they decide who is going to be granted, a favorable response to the case. In this situation, of course, the buyer will be in breach of the contract, and I'm pretty confident that the seller will be receiving the $9,000. But now we would be in a situation where we would have to put the house back on the market, start some showings again, and negotiating on offers once again, which it's not in the seller's best interest. Having said all that, I'm going to go ahead and process this form just to try to get some type of response from the buyer, because at the end of the day, if we don't process this form and we try to negotiate the request for repairs and there's no agreement, it's going to be somewhat more difficult to try to get the seller to keep the $9,000 if we have not processed any of the notice buyer to perform. So this is the first step for the seller to take if they want to move forward with canceling the deal, and then of course receiving the earnest money deposit from escrow. Never give legal advice to your buyers or your sellers. Anytime that there's anything that is legal related, you should call the legal hotline. And so that wraps up this training on the notice buyer to perform and how you should respond in a situation where the buyer does not want to complete the contingency removal for not only the buyer's investigation, but pretty much for any one of these items here. They don't want to remove the appraisal contingency, the loan contingency, you send them a notice to perform. And as simple as that. Once this is processed, they don't respond within the 2 days, the seller can cancel. Now you can move forward with the next steps on trying to keep the $9,000. So if you have any questions, any concerns, any suggestions, please comment below or contact me. Thank you.